other allies, other markets that it can look at, and India is not going to be the loser at the end of these 50% tariffs, and America is soon going to feel the heat, as many within America are also pointing out. Now, here's why Mr. Peter Navarro is completely wrong. India is not fueling the war machine because India is not, in fact, the highest buyer, the biggest buyer of Russian oil. In fact, it is China. China and the imports of oil imports from Russia stand at about $129 billion. Compare that to India, that stands about $67 billion. This is just as of 2024 for 1 year. The European Union is then the third. Of course, European Union's imports from Russia, at least oil imports, have reduced significantly given the 3-year war that it's in the midst of in Ukraine. They stand about at $36 billion, not very far away from where India is. So why exactly is India then being singled out? That's a question that many in New Delhi and many around the world are asking Donald Trump and his advisors. This is how he gets it wrong. This is not the only reason why. This is not Modi's war, as Peter Navarro claims. The United States gave $134 billion in aid to Ukraine, both financially and militarily, in a span of 3 years since the Ukraine war began. The European Union too has given aid, a staggering amount of $157 billion to Ukraine, again, financially and militarily. Contrast that to what India has done to Russia. It's been just about $67 billion in the year of 2024. So why exactly does Donald Trump and his administration think that it's India and New Delhi that seems to be keeping this conflict in Ukraine alive? India has made it very clear that we are not going to kowtow to what Donald Trump is dictating us and what he wants us to do. In fact, Prime Minister Modi, who is in Japan, has sent out a message that's loud and clear. In an interview to a Japanese daily, Prime Minister Modi said, and he spoke about India and China together. He spoke about his SCO summit where he is going to be traveling to next. He says that this meeting with President Xi Jinping in Kazan last year had ensured that there is steady and positive progress that has been made between India and China and our bilateral ties. Prime Minister Modi spoke about stable, predictable and amicable bilateral relations between India and China. He said as two neighbors and two largest nations on earth, both of us can have a positive impact on regional and global peace. He said this is crucial for a multipolar Asia and a multipolar world. He then spoke about the volatility we see in the world economy. Given that this comes just a few days after these tariffs of America kicked in for India, what he says next is extremely important. Prime Minister Modi said that it is key for India and China as two major economies to work together to bring stability to the world economic order. India is ready to advance bilateral ties and form a strategic and long-term perspective on the basis of mutual trust, mutual respect and mutual sensitivity. That is what the Prime Minister said. So this message is not just for those people listening in Japan and in China, where the Prime Minister is going to be next. It is also for the United States. So is Donald Trump and his administration listening to this message that we've asked and that New Delhi repeatedly asks? That's the question we ask here on Plain Speak.
They send us their goods here. We can't send them theirs. We pay them a bunch of money. They use it to buy Russian oil. Then the Russians, what do? They use it to fuel their war machine, kill a bunch more Ukrainians.
S&P ग्लोबल ने 2 दशक बाद भारत के क्रेडिट रेटिंग अपग्रेड किए हैं. The world is not just watching India. It is counting on India. साथ मिलकर हम ग्लोबल साउथ, विशेषकर अफ्रीका के विकास में अहम योगदान दे सकते हैं. मैं आप सबसे आग्रह करता हूं, कम मेक इन इंडिया, मेक for the world.
Let's open this up. Ashok Sajjanhar, former Indian diplomat, joins us here. Tarakarta, former director of the NSCS, is with us as well. Michael Kugelman, senior South Asia analyst and senior fellow at the Asia Pacific Foundation. And Lieutenant General D.B. Pandey, former GOC of the 15th Corps of the Indian Army, joins us as well. Let me open this up by asking Michael Kugelman. There seems to be at least some unease, at least on the look of it, in the United States, given what we are seeing over this weekend, first in Japan and in China. The Prime Minister is going to be in China for that SCO meeting. Apart from the summit itself, we are going to be seeing both the presidents of China and Russia, President Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping, meeting the Prime Minister on a one-on-one. How do you see these kind of developments, given what the United States is trying to do with India, trying to single us out as far as tariffs are concerned, this kind of realignment that India seems to be going into? Is that something that leaves the United States unnerved?
I mean, I wouldn't say it's realignment in the sense that we have seen India for almost a year now pursuing a policy in which it aims to ease tensions with China to an extent. Likewise, of course, India's relationship with Russia has always been rock solid. So in that sense, the fact that the Prime Minister will be going to China and meeting with the Chinese and the Russian leaders, I mean, that's not something that should be a total surprise, and certainly is not driven only by the Trump factor. Though I do think the optics will be very powerful for Modi to stand alongside President Xi and President Putin. And, at a moment when the U.S.'s relationship with India has gone downhill, and at a moment when the U.S. is trying to pressure India to distance itself from Russia, I think it could be very, very powerful optics there from the perspective of the Indian, Chinese, and Russian sides. But I don't think we should overstate this notion of a realignment because, yes, I mean, we're seeing India move a bit closer to China and double down on its relationship with Russia. But these are patterns that have been playing out for quite some time.
Sure. So maybe not realignment as such, Ashok Sajjanhar, but given the timing of it all, and like Kugelman said, that the optics are of course high there, and it's symbolic, the kind of messaging we want to send to the United States, that these are three countries, these are three leaders that you seem to have a problem with on multiple fronts, be it China, Russia or India. And all three of them are now in one corner.
Yeah, thank you very much, Poonam. You're right. I think as a messaging, it's very, very powerful, very important. I think one really needs to keep in mind, Poonam, that, the normalization and stabilization of relations between India and China started well before even, when Mr. Trump was elected in November of last year. In fact, the meeting after 5 years that took place in October 2020 in Kazan on the sidelines of the BRICS summit. So it was, one did not know whether Trump would be there. One did not know what policies Trump would follow, because basically I think the whole world, including India, had thought that Trump 2.0 is going to be a linear extrapolation of Trump 1.0, and India had been able to handle Trump 1.0 quite well, quite decently. So we thought we were on a strong wicket. But as far as Mr. Trump is concerned, that has not happened. But as far as China is concerned, this stabilization has been going on. People-to-people relations, in terms of Kailash Mansarovar Yatra, in terms of issuing visas to tourists, in terms of people-to-people exchanges, those have been going on now for the last 4-5 months. And, basically we are trying to take the relationship to the pre-Galwan level. So normalization and stabilization, but definitely not in terms of the strategic partnership. The meeting, of course, gives it increasing relevance and increasing significance in the backdrop of what is happening geopolitically, which is what Mr. Trump has done as far as, imposition of 50% tariffs on India. That having been said, India is going to be very cautious. India is going to be very careful in terms of moving forward on its rapprochement with China. There are going to be baby steps that we are going to take. We are going to be very careful. Because, meaning that would be too simplistic and naive an argument to say that since the United States is against you, you go into the embrace of China. No, not at all. I think there are huge problems that India has with China, but will have to contend with. But of course, I think both countries realize that for two large countries, territorially, in terms of population, in terms of economy, in terms of military might, for them to have normal and stable relations with each other is good for them, is good for the region, and is good for the world. Poonam.
Absolutely. And Tarakarta, as far as the United States is concerned, what we are seeing in Japan now and what we will be seeing in China, the kind of reactions that have come to the fore is only as far as tariffs are concerned. Both China and Russia have called out the United States for these tariff measures, for these reciprocal or retaliatory measures that the United States seems to be taking.
No, they definitely, obviously, they will call out the US on such things, but Poonam, the problem here is actually, it is that this loud decibel noise coming from the US, which you just showed, Navarro's statements, is making it more and more difficult for India to make a strategic kind of an adjustment. Basically, as a democracy, you're being pushed into harder and harder into a corner. That is what is puzzling me. If the US wants a resolution, this is not the way to go about it, right? So that is number one. Number two is the fact that when they're talking of profiteering by Indian companies, you had ExxonMobil making 6.3 million an hour after the Ukraine war. Okay, so that is the kind of money ExxonMobil made. Now there are rumors, I don't know how true they are, that they're going back into Russia. Now, here is the problem. Once they go back into Russia and this situation stabilizes, will you see an end to cheap oil? I don't know. So this, as Ambassador said, this relationship with China is not like, well, a spurned girlfriend running somewhere. It is not on the rebound. There are two separate relationships. Each one has to be negotiated on its own merits. Having said that, the moves that China has made recently, particularly in its visit to Kabul, Pakistan, that trilateral, very interesting. They are looking at the region as a whole, which is absolutely the opposite of what the US is doing, which is trying to divide the region into bits.
Absolutely, and it is going to backfire for the United States is what many believe, even within the United States. And Lieutenant Pandey, I'll come to you, but because we were talking about Peter Navarro, I want to ask Michael Kugelman this. He's called India Kremlin's laundromat. He did that for a second time in just about 24 hours or so. How do you see that kind of assessment? Because India is not even the largest buyer of Russian oil. China is. But for some reason, they get that leeway. They get that 90-day extension and 15% tariffs while they wait for the deal.
Right. I mean, clearly these allegations are not at all rooted in fact. Indeed, India is not the top importer of Russian oil right now. And, not only that, I mean, there's this broader critique coming from the administration about India driving the Russian war machine. And of course, as you well know, India's government, including the prime minister, have relentlessly been calling for the war to end. So it beggars belief to suggest that India is driving the war effort in Russia. It's unfortunate that this rhetoric from the U.S. side has reached the point where I think it's not only undiplomatic, but it also is insulting. And this is a relationship that has really emerged as a really critical one for the U.S. over the last 20 years. So it's unfortunate that we're at this point now where we're having these allegations that are not only undiplomatic, but rooted in anything but fact.
And that's the most unfortunate bit, but it seems like Donald Trump and his advisors are only doubling down on the kind of claims that they're making, which are unsubstantiated, like you said. But Lieutenant Pandey, as far as India's relationship with China is concerned, we may want to have China close to us, but it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? We've had history with China not holding up their end of the bargain when it comes to our territory, when it comes to armed military conflict.
So, I just a day or two back, very unfortunately, a foreign diplomat in India happened to ask me a question that what is a major threat today to India? And he started by saying, is it Pakistan, China, and by the way, he added USA. And, that's a message which is going out to the entire world that, look, this rhetoric which is happening is China anti-India or something. And this is not my view. Unfortunately, the view of the policymakers or people who are actually feeding to the king called Trump is an issue. For this particular question, answer to the question, I must tell you one thing that India is batting for its own side, right? I'm quite sure that our national security system is cognizant of a fact that China is going to be our competition for a long time. It is just because they come across in a particular time to engage with us doesn't mean that the old contest and competition is to go away, right? That remains on one side. So therefore, I'm quite sure that this engagement, and I totally agree with Sajan Harji, what he says that this relationship and the change and transition have been happening for last about 9 months. In fact, it was last year October when the pullback took place between India and China at the LAC. After nearly about 4 years of stalemate along the line of actual control. And since then, a system of repairing of the bridges is going on. The most beautiful part of this relationship is that while we are contesting on the border, and in fact, our political parties are baying for blood against the Chinese, and so are the people. But yet, there's been maturity in the government that the trade continues to be stable in a manner, in fact, continues to grow. So, while contest on geographical territorial interest continues, but yet our engagement in terms of trade has grown. So, therefore, it reflects a certain degree of maturity on both sides of our border between the Chinese leadership and the Indian leadership. I will also talk of this issue again. India doesn't deal with countries in an episodic manner. So let's say about 9 months, 10 months back, Americans came back saying that you buy Russian oil so that we need to drive down the price and stuff like that. And now suddenly you switch gear and say, no, no, don't buy. Indian relationship with world, even with the poorest of the country, it may be Maldives, it may be any other country in the world, is a stable, Maldives president came onto a notion or a electoral vote bank of kick India out, right? After
Right.
having come back, we continue to engage with them. So India is not episodic. It is strategic, it's long term. Our relationship with all countries are stable. Unfortunately, for nearly 100 years, Americans have been able to get away with episodic system that they can switch on and switch off trade, or they can have sanctions, or they can use leverage of sanctions to isolate a country. But very interestingly, this time, please understand that neither European Union is with them. Neither smallest element of any of the world today is with the American president on this call of trade and tariff. And the contrast has unfortunately come about that I will never be very happy calling out, talking positive of the Chinese. Chinese have come out much more strategic, right? They are engaging with everybody else. And here you got a president that he's trying to actually being combative on system of trade. While I understand that there is a compulsion, but they need to actually, and I agree with all the three panelists that somewhere person like Navarro needs to actually go back and ask President Trump that if Putin has said in that bilateral meeting in the press conference that 20% trade has increased in last 7 to 8 months, who is actually killing the Ukrainians? Is it the American money or is it the Indian oil purchase? Right, 20% of trade with Russia, and when he has gone with the delegation, he's gone with the trade delegation to visit the Russians. You look at the contrast, and on one side, while you have gone back from that trade deal, you may have succeeded, not succeeded. We don't know the true input and output of this entire deals. But here and thereafter, you come out and you start calling out India, which is actually not even a fraction of the world oil which is being purchased, right?
Absolutely. And the United States and the European Union, Tara Karta, have been trading with Russia. It may have decreased over a period of time in the last 3 years, but that trade hasn't completely vanished. The imports from Russia to both these blocs continue. So then do you think it's just, the fact that India would not kiss the ring, to so to say, of Donald Trump, but is why we're seeing these kind of retaliatory tariffs?
There's also another factor. They started the war. I mean, why are you asking us to stop it? This is Europe back at its tricks, which has been on for hundreds of years. They've been at war almost perpetually. That's one. Number two is the fact that, we are, what shall I say, we are, like I again said, it is Indo-US relations underneath has a very strong framework. That is the saddest part. There is a very, very, what shall I say? You had two, I mean, one meeting recently went virtual for whatever reason. Some things have gone on the back burner. But there is a range of activities across the board through in the whole partnership which we've had, which is rock solid. And the whole problem is that this public, sloganeering is taking a brick back to the whole relationship. I'm hoping that the bureaucracy back in Washington takes a more mature view and goes on with the relationship as it has always been in terms of collaboration in aircraft manufacturing, aircraft carrier manufacturing, in terms of so many areas which are potentially huge. But this public, pathetic, I can't call it diplomacy. It's not diplomacy. I don't know what it is. That is now you are nearly into like a train wreck situation, right? For no reason. That's the sad part. If it was
and Donald Trump is a mercurial person. I mean, diplomacy is not something that he probably understands, as many would say, or cares about. But I want to ask Michael Kugelman this, talking about Donald Trump and his sort of temperament, the kind of comments we're seeing from the Trump administration, these 50% tariffs on India, do you think that's just then a result of bruised ego? Because Donald Trump has been on multiple occasions saying how he mediated truce between India and Pakistan after Operation Sindoor, a claim that India has rejected multiple times. Now, a U.S. investment firm has also come out and hinted that, it's just Trump's personal pique of not being allowed to mediate in that conflict that seems to be behind this kind of rash decision of imposing 50% tariffs.
I certainly think that's a big part of it. Indeed, I do think the fact that India has not been willing to give Trump the credit that he seeks for playing a role in the ceasefire. I think one could look at other reasons why he might feel aggrieved at the Indian government. One could look at his invitation to Prime Minister Modi to visit Washington after the Prime Minister was in Canada for the G7 and the Prime Minister declined the invitation. One could also look at a phone call that Prime Minister Modi had with President Trump some months ago when the Prime Minister, for several minutes, as I understood it, told President Trump that he was wrong about his role in the ceasefire. But I think that the fact how the trade talks went between the U.S. and India, when India put its foot down and declined to make all of the concessions that the U.S. sought, I think that upset the president as well. So I don't want to, this is not the only factor why things have gone south in the relationship,
sure,
and why we've been seeing this nasty rhetoric from the U.S. side.
Sure, but even if it
is, this is part of the story.
So even if it is then part of the story, then what happens to ties between the two countries? Because Donald Trump is here for at least another 3 years or so. What happens to ties between the two countries then, and what happens once Trump exits?
Right, and clearly this relationship is far too important to essentially place on hold for 3 years until you have a change of government in the U.S. It's a very high stakes relationship. So I think that one of the questions moving forward is, will there be some off ramps? Will there be opportunities for the two sides to clear the air? And in principle, there might be an opportunity next month if Prime Minister Modi and President Trump are both in New York for the UNGA meetings. If they are, then they'd have an opportunity to meet. Whether they choose to meet each other would be the big question. But I think that, when you have a big crisis like this, the best way to move forward is to have the top leaders from the two countries meet and try to clear the air. And so we'll see if that happens next month.
Ashok Sajjanhar, do you think that's something that will help the two leaders, Prime Minister Modi and Donald Trump, only if they sit down together and have a conversation, that the situation that we're in could change? Because even the trade negotiations have been in a deep freeze, even though India was one of the first countries to have approached the United States for a trade deal.
No, you're absolutely right. India was the first, India had the first mover advantage. We went there on the 13th of February. And as you know, Poonam, that, India has acted in good faith as far as these negotiations are concerned. Even before India went, there were a number of areas that were of interest to the United States. Like this tax on digital services, like, the tariff on the bourbon whiskey, etc. Many of those areas which we knew were of interest to the United States, as a matter of good faith, we had reduced, we had taken action which would, send out a signal, send out a message to the United States that India was serious. And India, I think on the industrial products, we have made a number of concessions which are unprecedented. What we hear in terms of the reports that are coming out, unprecedented concessions that we had given. But when Michael Kugelman says that we stuck to these guns and did not give in, these are issues that are known to the United States, not for the last 5 months, last 5 years, but more than that. That these are issues which are absolute red lines. As far as dairy is concerned, milk and cheese, if you are getting it from cattle to whom you are feeding intestines and bone meals, etc., that is not acceptable in India. So you realize that. Don't push that. Are you going to sell pig meat to Muslim countries? Meaning, is that the sort of insensitivity that you are trying to sort of, show on India, that you have to open up? These things will not succeed. And, if, one of the reasons, Michael Kugelman did mention about those, all the countries, whether it is EU, whether it is Japan, whether it is South Korea, whether it is UK, all of them are getting on their knees as far as Trump is concerned. They are bending, they are bowing, they are genuflecting. If Mr. Trump expects that Mr. Modi will also do the same thing, and this is what he expected, and he was denied that pleasure, that is never going to happen. Agriculture, dairy, GMOs, there are issues beyond trade. There are non-trade issues that we have to deal with, and that the Americans should have understood by now.
And
if they
it's
have
not just about these
understood,
sectors that are being covered in the bilateral trade deal. Lieutenant General Pandey, it's also about the kind of arms sale or the arms trade that India has with the Russians. They may not, United States may not have said it right now, but they've always had a problem with how Russia has been the largest defense partner as far as India is concerned. They want India to change that and buy more from the United States.
Yeah, frankly, yes, that is one of the small part actually, but India over a period of last about decade plus has really diversified its market or its purchases, not only stuck to Russia. Russia is one of the major, this thing we are getting from Israel, we are getting from France, we are getting from other countries also. And of course, we are kicking in our own indigenous defense industry, which is enabling us and also sending out exports. I think, Poonam, this is quite episodic. In last 2 decades, 2.5 decades, we had a great stable relationship in which a tentative actions were being taken to dehyphenate Pakistan, India. It was also an action being taken in which the newer generation of the strategic thinkers of US had started to understand that they need to engage with India, which is possibly the most stable nation and the largest democracy here. And they need to engage within the future because we think alike. There is a huge amount of freedom which is between the two countries in that sense. And therefore, please understand, while this sharp engagement which is coming out from Trump and his very close allies in administration, but the larger, lower level strategic engagement continues to go and it continues to be very, very stable as of now, right? Their teams are visiting on either side. We are going on certain this thing. They have already, designated LET or TRF as a US designated terrorist, this thing. There are a number of other small actions which continues to go. We are already having our defense engagement in terms of bilateral exercises. All those things will continue. This is not about Russian oil. This I also don't think is about, I think the Americans understand that if you compel India to relent on dairy product, on agriculture aspect, it is political. 1.4 billion, we got about nearly 35 to 40% people who will get straight away affected, not only with the kind of food which is going to come, that non-vegetarian kind of dairy products will come, but also our own farmers are going to get affected. It's all about politics. Then there is an issue. I think this is more about personal. Trump has taken two things very, very close to his heart. One is, as Sajjan Harji just said, that everybody is bending backwards to please him. In case you imagine, I'm quite sure Modi, if had to relent only for his personal this thing that would be a larger good for the country, would have done. But he represents 1.4 billion people, right? In this social media flat information world, any statement which Prime Minister says or does, any action which does, you just can't meet somebody in G20 forum and say, okay, just let's go visit into Washington and set a chess game in which I'll get you Asim Munir, and Asim Munir is not even a representative of a political system of Pakistan.
Absolutely, and the kind of tilt that we are seeing in Trump 2.0 towards Pakistan, that's something that's problematic and is not sitting well here in New Delhi as well. But since you spoke about Pakistan, and I want to get in Michael Kugelman on that, because now we have Sergio Gore, who's going to be an envoy to India, but he's not an envoy just to India. He's a special envoy, Mr. Kugelman, that has been announced for South and Central Asia. Do you think the United States then is back to this hyphenation between India and Pakistan, something that India has tried very hard to dehyphenate?
Yeah, there's a lot of uncertainties about how this is going to play out. And of course, Mr. Gore still needs to be confirmed by the U.S. Senate to begin his ambassadorship. But the special envoy post does not,
Sure.
I do not believe will require any confirmation, meaning that he could begin the role of envoy even before he begins the role of ambassador, if he is confirmed. So, the question is, if you're a special envoy for South and Central Asia, what exactly does that mean? It certainly suggests a level of rehyphenation because, the U.S. certainly sees South Asia as a region that includes both India and Pakistan. I think that it definitely will raise certain questions. And then if he is confirmed as ambassador and then he's posted in New Delhi, serving in that special envoy role, I do think that one possibility is that the president would hope that he could serve as an informal mediator between India and Pakistan. And clearly that's something that would not sit well in India. I don't think it would sit well in Pakistan either, for that matter, because Pakistan wouldn't want a U.S. government official seeking to mediate on India-Pakistan issues from a base in India. So I think that there's still a lot that remains to be seen about how this position will play out, but a lot of question marks because it's certainly something that has not happened before.
And it would also define where ties between India and the United States go from here on, because it's not just about trade and tariffs. It's a lot of diplomacy that's also going to have to work really hard to ensure that ties don't spiral downward any further from where we're at. But I have to leave it there. I thank you all for joining us here on this edition of Plain Speak. But speaking of the Prime Minister currently is in Japan, but he is going to be in China tomorrow. He is going to be there for the SCO summit. But on the sidelines, he's also going to be holding bilateral meetings with Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin. So why exactly is this important? The fact that we are seeing Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping sit down for that bilateral meeting, because it hints at an ease in tensions amid the kind of volatility that we're seeing in the world economy, the kind of tariff pressure that we're seeing from the United States. China as well is in talks with the United States over a trade deal. It's also significant because we had the Chinese foreign minister in India not too long ago, and both countries have termed each other as partners and not as adversaries. In fact, China's envoy to India had also denounced the United States as a bully when these tariffs had come into effect. Beijing has been seeing improved ties to counter Western influence in the Indo-Pacific. Like I mentioned, as far as the Prime Minister's interview to the Japan Daily is concerned, he made it very clear that it's important for us to work together to bring stability to this world economic order. That's one meeting. The other meeting that we are going to be looking at on the sidelines of the SCO summit is the one between Prime Minister Modi and President Putin. So this troika that seems to be playing out as far as the SCO is concerned, while Russia seeks to reinforce that its traditional partnership maintained with India as well, given the kind of pressure that the United States seems to be putting. In fact, Russian diplomat had hinted at a possibility of a trilateral discussion as well. The focus, of course, is going to be on easing of trade barriers, on new cooperation areas. That's something that China and Russia will be looking at. Particularly for China, it will also be looking at what happens at the LAC. As far as China-Russia relationship is concerned, it's a stable source of world peace, is what Xi Jinping had said. It also is looking for Russia to play a part as far as the global south goes as a counter to the United States. Xi Jinping also wants to use this summit as an opportunity to showcase a post-American-led international order. And given the times we're in, where Donald Trump seems to be on a war path with pretty much every country in the world, the timing is significant. It's a message that counters the United States' efforts against countries like India, China, Russia and Iran as well. So what exactly are we looking at, both from these bilateral meetings and from the SCO summit as a whole? Rahul Shivshankar is joining us and getting us this exclusive and exhaustive report from Tianjin in China of what to expect from the SCO summit.
Viewers, we are here in China, in Tianjin to be precise, which is going to be playing host to Prime Minister Narendra Modi in just 24 hours. Tianjin is a port city which brings in actually a lot of trade from SCO countries, the 10 member states of the SCO, the 2 observers and the 6 associate members. All of that trade passes through Tianjin, so it's not for any miscellaneous reason why the SCO is being held here, but for a very pertinent one, because what is in the news? Trade tyranny, Trumpian trade tyranny. And both the Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, and President Xi have already made it quite clear that trade will be on the agenda, deepening an equation which had soured for a few years, would revolve around trying to find middle ground on trade issues, geonomics, not so much perhaps the geopolitics, which remains a little tetchy and piquant between the two countries, but 24 hours, the Prime Minister lands. The very next morning, which is Sunday morning, at around midday here, a conversation is going to begin. It's already raining, but on that particular day, it's going to be sunny, and let's just hope that bright sunshine illuminates the relationship. Let me tell you that the Prime Minister, who is expected, has already spoken in Japan, as we know, in the company of the Japanese Prime Minister, saying that he's really looking forward to deepening the equations with China on the trade front. In fact, let me tell you that a few days back, the Prime Minister commented in his meeting with Wang Yi, the Chinese External Affairs Minister, that he expected stable, predictable and constructive ties with Beijing. And while I won't say that that is beyond the realm of possibility, we will see obviously a degree of awkwardness when the two leaders meet. It's not been the best of times for the two countries. So to come to this stability, they need trust. And that has been in deficit ever since Galwan. And to be honest, since Galwan, there has also been a recalcitrance from India to normalize relations. There has also been, of course, Beijing's own attempt at disrupting relations by lock, stock and barrel, getting into bed, so to speak, with Pakistan in a collusive relationship which led really to India feeling the heat during Operation Sindoor. Remember, the Chinese were giving real-time intelligence to Pakistan, which irked India because it went beyond simply military cooperation and, of course, political confidence building of Pakistan. This crossed a limit which led to what is known as a uniform or unified military front, and India found itself in some ways battling two enemies at one go. The Chinese will have to walk more than half the distance, let me be very honest, if this is going to work, because the trust deficit really has opened up, because Beijing has viewed our relationship through what is known as a zero-sum lens. Therefore, viewers, the Prime Minister will be expecting certain assurances from Xi Jinping. Whether those will be forthright and whether they will actually be laid out in formal terms on the table as part of an agreement remains to be seen. But the emphasis will be, as I said, to build confidence. And the one way that the two capitals, Beijing and Delhi, think that they can do that is by deepening the trade relationship. So expect some amount of concessions on both sides on the trade front. But we'll have to, of course, wait and see. This is going to be a delicate dance. It is not a reset, as many people have been suggesting it is. It is not a reset. It will mean that we will begin rather to formalize an association that had gone a bit cold. So that's really from me here in Tianjin as we look forward to those important talks.
Now, speaking of the United States and what the kind of message that India, Russia and China want to send out, well, Donald Trump seems to be on a warpath on multiple issues. In fact, the U.S. government has stated that a new immigration rule is going to come into effect and is going to be necessary to curb visa abuse, is what the administration claims, by limiting the duration of stay for foreign students and exchange visitors in the country. The Department of Homeland Security said that it will publish the proposed regulation on Thursday, which was yesterday. Now, since 1978, students on F visas have been allowed to stay for the duration of the status, meaning that they could remain in the United States for as long as they were enrolled full-time in an academic program. The new proposal would instead grant admission for the length of a student's program up to a maximum of 4 years. These officials of the administration stated that the rule is designed to prevent the kind of abuse that we are seeing in the United States, or at least that's the claim that the U.S. administration seems to be making as far as these immigration visas are concerned. Remember, the United States has been talking about specific vetting that will be undertaken by the administration of several students, and that scrutiny is only going to intensify further, especially as far as social media accounts are concerned. In fact, a DHS spokesperson also said that for far too long, past administrations have allowed foreign students and other visa holders to remain in the United States indefinitely. They claim that this poses safety risks, costing untold amounts of taxpayer dollars, and it disadvantages U.S. citizens. So let's now see how this H-1B program helped the United States, because United States may think that this is abuse, but H-1B visa holders have actually been ensuring that skilled, cheaper labor is boosted, and that helps in the growth in computer science. It encourages startups, more innovation. In fact, it's raised productivity in the United States as well. Growth in tech lifted wages in other sectors, helping both graduates outside of computer science and non-graduates. It has led to lower prices for technology products in the United States. It has led to faster innovation. It has improved consumer welfare. But for some reason, the Donald Trump administration seems to be blind to all of that. Now, there are around 300 million H-1B workers that pay billions in taxes. They spend heavily in businesses in the United States. They support local economies. Research also shows that H-1B visas can create nearly 2 extra jobs for Americans by boosting demand and business expansion. But for some reason, the only lens that the Donald Trump administration sees this through is that it's snatching away jobs of Americans. Many H-1B holders file patents or launch businesses as well. They've contributed to breakthroughs, including COVID-19 vaccines. The program is concentrated in tech cities like New York, like San Jose, like San Francisco, and it reinforces their global competitiveness. Without H-1B visas, firms risk offshoring work to Canada, to other cheaper countries, perhaps in the Southeast Asian market, India or China, for example. That would take growth and innovation away from the United States. This visa curve fallout would also ensure that there is a talent tech crunch. Can the United States afford that? There are stricter rules that the United States wants to bring in, but that may trigger hiring gaps. It may raise labor costs. Has the Trump administration thought of that? Innovation could also slow down. Visa curves will also hurt the global tech leadership that the United States seems to have at the moment. Could this shift to another country mean that the United States loses out on that? It also would mean that there is revenue loss from education. If you push out all foreign students from the United States, where are these American universities going to get their revenue from? Perhaps the Donald Trump administration has realized this, which is why the president has decided to welcome 600,000 Chinese students. But these stricter rules remain for everyone else. In fact, they threaten billions in university income. There is a skills gap that could be seen as well. These restrictions may deepen shortage of skilled workers. The impact on the U.S. economy could be seen. Indian students, remember, contribute about $12 billion annually to the U.S. economy. That's something that the United States is risking to lose. Their global competitiveness could also come at a risk. Canada, United Kingdom, Australia, they all offer easy student and work routes. Could they then be the replacements that United States seems to be pushing their way? And if that happens, where does the United States go from there? That's something that the Trump administration perhaps needs to give a thought to. Shifting focus now to what's happening in Ukraine. It's a war that Donald Trump wanted to end within 100 days of him coming to power, but that's far from happening. In fact, Kiev endured one of its worst nights since the start of the war 3 years ago because Russia launched its second largest aerial assault on Ukraine. At least 19 people were killed, including 4 children. The strikes also damaged buildings linked to the European Union and the British Council, and it prompted both Brussels and London to summon Russian diplomats. EU's Kyiv mission, in place since 1993, too, was directly hit. In fact, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky called the attack a horrific and deliberate killing of civilians and a clear response to global calls for ceasefire. European Commission President condemned this assault, saying that Kremlin is terrorizing Ukraine, even targeting the European Union. But despite this violence, Kremlin claimed that it targeted military sites using high-precision weapons. In fact, Moscow reiterated interest in peace talks while continuing its special military operation. British Prime Minister called out Putin for killing civilians and derailing any hopes of peace. But what is significant is that the U.S. president remained silent.
He was not happy about this news, but he was also not surprised. These are two countries that have been at war for a very long time.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt on Thursday sharing President Donald Trump's reaction to Russia's massive attack on Ukraine, Moscow's second largest aerial assault on the country since the war began. Officials said the dark of night bombardment on Kyiv killed at least 21 people, including 4 children, and damaged buildings belonging to the European Union and the British Council. The rescue effort was massive. Ukrainian authorities said hundreds of responders were sent to multiple locations. As the sun rose over the streets of Kyiv, those efforts were still underway, the city's residents sharing the horror of the attack.
I looked up, the roof was gone, and the floors from the 4th to the 1st were completely destroyed. As of now, my wife hasn't been found.
Russia's defense ministry said it struck military-industrial complex enterprises and military air bases, but Kyiv's mayor had a very different take.
This attack is one of the examples of Russian country is terrorist country, destroyed civilians.
Ukraine's president said the strike shows Russia's goals haven't changed.
In Washington, we heard that Putin is supposedly ready to end the war, but he chooses ballistics instead of any real steps toward peace.
I'm Reed Binion reporting.
Thank you so much for tuning in here on Plain Speak. We came to you live from the CNN News 18 Primetime Studio, presented by Schneider Electric Smart Home Solutions.
Co-powered by. This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
Dear shareholders, I am happy to share with you the details of yet another stellar year of business and financial performance achieved despite multiple challenges. In the financial year 25, Reliance delivered a record consolidated revenue of 10.71 lakh crores, becoming India's first ever company to cross $125 billion in annual revenues. Reliance's EBITDA stood at 1,83,422 crores and net profit grew to 81,309 crores. Reliance's exports were at 2,83,719 crores, contributing to 7.6% of India's total merchandise exports. Reliance invested cumulatively rupees 5.6 lakh crores in the last 3 years. Reliance remains the single largest contributor to the national exchequer, contributing rupees 2,10,269 crores in the financial year 25. In the last 6 years, Reliance's contribution to the national exchequer crossed rupees 10 lakh crores. I am also proud to report that Reliance's CSR spending in the financial year 25 rose to 2,156 crores. Reliance's cumulative CSR expenditure over the last 3 years crossed rupees 5,000 crores. This is a clear reflection of our unwavering commitment to social impact. Friends, employment generation for India's talented youth is a national priority. it is also a priority for Reliance. Globally, the dynamics of employments are undergoing a shift towards flexibility, driven mainly by AI and automation. Reliance has also adopted modern engagement formats that combine opportunities for upskilling, entrepreneurial drive, job satisfaction, and higher earning potential. Today, our conventional and non-conventional workforce has grown to nearly 6.8 lakh people. I see this growing to more than 10 lakh people over the next few years. It gives me immense satisfaction to say that we continue to be amongst the most admired employers and rank among the largest job creators in India. Reliance continues to lead across every key growth parameter: revenues, profitability, exports, market value, investments, contribution to the exchequer, and social impact. I am confident that Reliance will continue to break its own records in business performance next year and beyond. Dear friends, let me begin by sharing with you the impressive performance of our digital business. Just a week from now, Jio will enter its 10th year of service to the nation. Looking back, these years have been the most glorious in India's digital history. Today, I'm proud to share with you that the Jio family has crossed 500 million customers. The 500 million milestone is a symbol of your unwavering trust and support. I offer my heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you. I have heard people say, Jio changed my life, and I love Jio. But I say from my heart, actually, each and every Indian built Jio by simply making it a part of their lives. Let me present a short video of our Jio journey, how 500 million Indians made Jio. All of you made Jio.
आइए दोस्तों, देश के अलग अलग हिस्सों में चलते हैं और भारत ने जियो कैसे बनाया उन किस्सों को सुनते हैं। ये है मुंबई के टीचर अभिषेक साठे, जो हर रोज कमाल कर रहे हैं।
बच्चा पार्टी, अपना अपना कैमरा ऑन करो। किसी को पीछे छूटने नहीं दिया जब हर एक बच्चे को पढ़ाया। जियो मैंने बनाया।
ऐसे कर्मठ टीचर्स की वजह से भारत का आने वाला कल कभी पीछे नहीं छूटा। जी हाँ देवी जी,
हमारी बहू रानी ने ना क्या कहा था, यूपी
मांझे यूपीआई। जब मैंने यूपीआई से बिजनेस चलाया तब जियो मैंने बनाया।
वाह, कितने गर्व की बात। इनकी तरह आज 5 करोड़ छोटे बड़े दुकानदार यूपीआई का इस्तेमाल करके अपना बिजनेस फैला रहे हैं। आइए देखते हैं यहाँ क्या चल रहा है।
जब के ड्रामा को गांव में ट्रेंड कराया तब जियो मैंने बनाया।
आज देश के 50 करोड़ लोग मनोरंजन का मजा फूंक फूंक के नहीं बल्कि दिल खोल के उठा रहे हैं।
हम सब बेस पर सही सलामत लौट आए हैं।
ये देखो बेटा,
बॉर्डर ऑपरेशन के बाद जब पापा को भरोसा दिलाया तब जियो मैंने बनाया।
अब मिलते हैं उस माँ से जिसकी ममता का सफर बस अभी अभी शुरू हुआ है।
मदरहुड की जिम्मेदारी के साथ साथ ऑफिस भी निभाया। जियो मैंने बनाया।
जहां देश की लाखों महिलाएं अपने ऑफिस से रिमोटली जुड़ी, वहीं कोविड के मुश्किल दौर में लाखों जानें भी बची।
जब वीडियो कॉल्स के थ्रू मैंने अपने पेशेंट्स तक इलाज पहुंचाया तब जियो मैंने बनाया।
जब से मन ने इस फोन को अपना घना यार बनाया तब से जियो मन ने बनाया। तू मन ने यो बता, यो हॉर्टिकल्चर से उपज कैसे बढ़ सके है?
सही जानकारी के साथ यारी करने का लाभ आज दूर दराज के गांव के 10 करोड़ किसान उठा रहे हैं।
देसी कारीगरी को दुनिया तक पहुंचाया जियो मैंने बनाया।
करोड़ों व्यापारी अपने ऑर्डर्स का ग्राफ बढ़ा रहे हैं और मेक इन इंडिया का झंडा लहरा रहे हैं। जब भारत की जनता ने हर छक्के, हर चौके को जश्न की तरह मनाया, तब जियो मैंने
मैंने
नान
मैंने बनाया।
सही तो कह रहे हैं। जियो को 50 करोड़ देशवासियों ने मिलकर बनाया और हम सबको डिजिटल इंडिया के नए युग में पहुंचाया। और ये तो नए डिजिटल इंडिया की बस शुरुआत है।
Friends, Jio was conceived at a time when India's road to digital transformation was blocked. Prohibitive data prices, poor connectivity, and even poorer speeds had stifled the digital aspirations of India.
This is News 18 Network. By Schneider Electric Smart Home Solutions.
Namaste, Jai Hind, and welcome to this edition of The Right Stand. I'm Anand Narasimhan, and we are coming to you live from the CNN News 18 Primetime Studios, presented by Schneider Electric Smart Home Solutions. Viewers, in yet another special edition, we're going to focus on how can this current generation and the future generations go back to its links, its roots, and connect more with Bharat. On the occasion of the Rashtriya Swayam Sevak Sangh completing 100 years, the Sarsang Chalak, Shri Mohan Bhagwat, held a 3-day lecture series to lay out the 100-year journey of the organization and the Sangh's vision of Bharat, highlighting the strides the nation has made in social welfare and economic growth. Mohan Bhagwat emphasized the importance of a cultural renaissance in Bharat to complement the nation's rise on the global stage. Mohan Bhagwat spoke on a few main issues, and let's try and understand them one by one, clearly focusing on Bharat, its roots, education, and of course the language of the ancients, that is Sanskritam. Number one is the Gurukul system of education, where Mohan Bhagwat said, and I quote, Gurukul education should be integrated into the mainstream, not replaced. Gurukul education is not about going and living in an ashram, but learning about the nation's traditions. All the information should be given to children about the past so that pride can be instilled. Now, what is or what was Gurukul education? It dates back to perhaps the Vedic period and thereafter, where students lived with their teacher in an ashram or a forest hermitage. So it was a distance and in-person university, huge ones, which were run by one particular teacher, Rishi, sage. Now, education encompassed Vedic learning, including mathematics, astronomy, medicine, arts, and physical training. Emphasis was placed on discipline, humility, respect, self-reliance, and service to society, or the Seva Bhav. Students participated in daily chores around the Gurukul, including cooking, cleaning, gathering firewood. So maintenance, upkeep, this inherent aspect of Swachhata was instilled in them. Guru to Shishya, guidance was provided not just in academics, but also in moral and spiritual growth. It was based on oral tradition or Shruti, including memorization, recitation, and discussion, strengthening critical thinking. The word Upanishad, come sit here and listen, started from this practice itself. Now, another aspect for a cultural revival that Mohan Bhagwat raised was the learning of Sanskrit. He said, and I quote, I am not in favor of making Sanskrit compulsory, but it is important to understand the country. And if you want to understand your tradition and know Bharat, knowledge of Sanskrit is very important. We shouldn't rely on translations, as many have errors, in order to access